Behind every abandoned hospital lies a story of healing turned to horror, hope transformed into nightmare. These medical institutions, once beacons of recovery, now stand as monuments to human suffering and institutional failure. Some harbored unethical experiments, others witnessed unspeakable treatments, and many simply couldn't escape the darkness that seeped into their very foundations. Tonight, we're counting down the 10 most disturbing abandoned hospitals whose walls still echo with the screams of the past. What you're about to discover will make you question everything you thought you knew about medical care in the 20th century. Number 10. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. The tuberculosis consumed everything it touched, but nothing quite like Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Built in 1910 to combat the tuberculosis epidemic sweeping through Kentucky, this imposing Gothic revival structure was designed to house 40 patients. By the 1930s, it held over 400 souls fighting for their lives. The sanatorium implemented controversial treatments, including artificial pneumothorax procedures, where doctors would collapse a patient's lung to rest the diseased organ. But the most chilling aspect wasn't the experimental medicine. It was the body chute, a 500-foot tunnel used to secretly remove the deceased to avoid demoralizing surviving patients. Urban explorers who've infiltrated the 5-story building since its closure in 1961 report phantom footsteps, disembodied voices, and shadow figures roaming the deteriorating hallways. The infamous Room 502 allegedly housed 2 nurse suicides, and visitors consistently report overwhelming feelings of despair in that specific location. Local paranormal investigators have documented over 63,000 deaths within these walls, making Waverly Hills one of America's most haunted locations. Number 9. Pennhurst State School and Hospital, Spring City, Pennsylvania. What was promised as a place of learning became a chamber of unspeakable horrors. Opened in 1908 as the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic, Pennhurst was designed to educate and care for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Instead, it became synonymous with institutionalized abuse that lasted nearly 8 decades. The facility housed over 3,500 residents at its peak, cramming patients into overcrowded dormitories where neglect and violence were daily reality. The truth emerged in 1968 when NBC reporter Bill Baldini's 5-part exposé, Suffer the Little Children, revealed patients tied to beds, left naked in their own filth, and subjected to experimental procedures without consent. Court documents later revealed systematic physical and sexual abuse, with staff referring to residents as vegetables and mental defectives. The landmark 1977 class action lawsuit, Halderman v. Pennhurst, established legal precedent for disability rights, but not before decades of documented torture had occurred. Abandoned since 1987, urban photographers have captured haunting images of restraint devices still shackled to walls, medical equipment scattered across floors, and children's drawings that somehow survived the institutional nightmare. Number 8. Bealitz Heilstätten, Brandenburg, Germany. Hidden in the forests outside Berlin lies a medical complex that treated both saviors and monsters. Constructed between 1898 and 1930, Bayalitz Heilstätten originally served as a sanatorium for lung diseases, particularly tuberculosis. The sprawling 200-hectare complex contained over 60 buildings designed in the distinctive red brick style of late 19th century German architecture. During World War I, it transformed into a military hospital, where a young Austrian corporal named Adolf Hitler recovered from a mustard gas attack in 1916, a recovery that would later reshape world history. Following World War II, the Soviet Army commandeered the facility, converting it into East Germany's largest military hospital. For nearly 5 decades, it remained completely sealed from the outside world, treating injured Soviet soldiers while simultaneously serving as a prison for political dissidents. Declassified documents suggest that unauthorized medical experiments occurred in the basement laboratories, though Soviet records remain largely classified. Since the Soviet withdrawal in 1994, the complex has become a magnet for urban explorers who've discovered surgical instruments still stained with blood, patient records scattered across floors, and operating theaters that appear frozen in time, as if surgeons simply vanished mid-procedure. Number 7. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Weston, West Virginia. They called it the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in North America, but size couldn't contain the suffering within. Designed by renowned architect Richard Snowden Andrews in 1858, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was intended to house 250 patients using the revolutionary Kirkbride Plan, a treatment philosophy emphasizing natural light, fresh air, and humane care. The Civil War delayed construction until 1881, and by the time it opened, the approach to mental health treatment had already begun its dark descent into lobotomies and electroshock therapy. What made this institution particularly sinister was Dr. Walter Freeman's frequent visits in the 1950s. Freeman, the self-proclaimed father of the American lobotomy, performed his barbaric ice-pick lobotomies on hundreds of patients here, including children as young as 12. He would insert an ice-pick-like instrument through the eye socket and sever connections in the frontal lobe, often performing multiple procedures in a single day without proper sterilization. The asylum closed in 1994 after housing over 700 patients in a facility designed for 200. Urban explorers have photographed Freeman's lobotomy tools still scattered in the medical wing, patient restraints welded to walls, and isolation cells barely large enough for a human body, testament to 9 decades of institutionalized torture disguised as medical treatment. Number 6. Danvers State Hospital, Danvers, Massachusetts. Built on cursed ground where Salem's witch trials once condemned the innocent, Danvers State Hospital seemed destined for darkness. Constructed in 1888 on Hathorne Hill, named after Judge John Hathorne, who presided over the Salem witch trials, this Gothic revival fortress was designed to embody the Kirkbride Plan's humane treatment philosophy. Instead, it became synonymous with overcrowding, patient abuse, and the horrors of early psychiatric medicine. The hospital's creator, Nathaniel Hawthorne's descendant, couldn't have imagined that his healing institution would become more terrifying than his ancestors' fictional House of Seven Gables. Danvers pioneered prefrontal lobotomies in the United States, with Dr. Walter Freeman performing his first ice pick procedure here in 1936. The hospital's basement morgue contained a crematorium where unclaimed bodies were burned, their ashes scattered in unmarked graves throughout the property. By the 1960s, over 2,000 patients were crammed into a facility designed for 600, with some confined to underground tunnels connecting the buildings. The hospital closed in 1992, but not before decades of documented abuse, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained patient deaths. Demolition began in 2005, yet urban explorers managed to photograph the infamous lobotomy chair still strapped to the floor in the basement surgical suite, along with patient medical records detailing procedures that would be considered torture by today's standards.
Number 5. Oradale Mental Hospital, Ararat, Australia. In the remote hills of Victoria, Australia, stands the Southern Hemisphere's largest abandoned psychiatric facility, where 13,000 patients died under mysterious circumstances. Opened in 1867 as the Ararat Lunatic Asylum, this sprawling complex was designed to house Melbourne's growing population of mentally ill patients far from public view. The isolated location, 200 kilometers from Melbourne, ensured that whatever happened within these walls would remain hidden from society. At its peak, Oradale housed over 1,000 patients in conditions that defied human dignity. What sets Oradale apart is the staggering death toll and the hospital's own cemetery containing over 9,000 unmarked graves. Many patients were buried without identification, their existence erased from official records. Recent investigations have revealed evidence of unauthorized medical experiments, including early electroshock therapy trials and pharmaceutical testing conducted without patient consent or family notification. The most disturbing discovery came in 2010 when renovation crews found a hidden room containing patient belongings dating back over a century. Suitcases, photographs, and personal items that were never returned to families, suggesting that many patients were declared dead while still alive. Oradale closed in 1993, but paranormal investigators continue to document unexplained phenomena, including phantom patients wandering the grounds and disembodied voices calling for help in languages no longer spoken. Number 4. Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital, Gyeonggi Province, South Korea. Sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones where nobody knows what really happened. Opened in 1982 in the mountains outside Seoul, Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital was a private facility that promised revolutionary treatment for South Korea's mentally ill population. For nearly 2 decades, the modern concrete structure housed hundreds of patients using contemporary psychiatric methods. Then, in 1996, it mysteriously closed overnight, with no official explanation provided by the government or hospital administration. The mystery deepened when local authorities sealed all medical records and refused to disclose patient statistics, treatment methods, or closure reasons.
rumor spread about mass patient deaths, experimental procedures conducted by foreign doctors, and government cover-ups related to chemical weapons testing. The hospital director, Dr. Kim Jong-soo, disappeared shortly after the closure and has never been found, despite extensive investigations. Urban explorers who've breached the facility's security have discovered patient restraints still attached to bed frames, medical equipment abandoned mid-procedure, and most disturbingly, patient records with pages deliberately torn out or burned. The basement levels remain sealed with industrial-grade locks, leading to speculation about hidden laboratories or mass graves. South Korean paranormal enthusiasts have documented over 200 unexplained disappearances in the surrounding mountains since the hospital's closure, fueling theories that something far more sinister than psychiatric treatment occurred within these walls. Number 3. Creedmoor Psychiatric Center, Queens, New York. In the shadow of New York City's skyline, a 300-acre complex concealed some of American psychiatry's darkest experiments. Established in 1912 as the farm colony of Brooklyn State Hospital, Creedmoor was designed to provide occupational therapy through agricultural work for the city's growing population of mentally ill patients. The sprawling campus featured over 50 buildings, including patient dormitories, workshops, and a working farm that supplied food to New York's hospital system. However, beneath this progressive facade lurked a far more sinister purpose. Declassified CIA documents revealed that Creedmoor served as a testing ground for the agency's MK-Ultra mind control experiments during the 1950s and 1960s. Dr. Ewan Cameron, a psychiatrist later exposed for his role in CIA psychological torture programs, conducted unauthorized experiments on patients using LSD, electroshock therapy, and sensory deprivation. Patients were subjected to drug-induced comas lasting weeks, during which they were exposed to repetitive audio messages designed to reprogram their personalities. The most chilling aspect of Creedmoor's legacy is the estimated 1,700 patients who died under suspicious circumstances between 1950 and 1970. Many deaths were attributed to experimental complications, though medical records were either destroyed or remain classified. Urban photographers who've documented the abandoned sections have captured images of isolation chambers, restraint devices, and basement rooms with soundproofing that suggests activities far beyond standard psychiatric treatment. Number 2. Norwich State Hospital, Preston, Connecticut. What began as a beacon of progressive mental health care transformed into a nightmare that would haunt Connecticut for over a century. Founded in 1904 as the Norwich Hospital for the Insane, this Kirkbride Plan facility was initially praised for its humane approach to mental health treatment. The campus featured beautiful brick buildings connected by underground tunnels, designed to provide patients with dignity and comfort during their recovery. However, by the 1920s, overcrowding and understaffing had turned Norwich into a warehouse for society's unwanted. The hospital's darkest chapter began in 1931 when Dr. Henry Cotton's focal infection theory took hold. Cotton believed that mental illness stemmed from infected body parts and began systematically removing patients' teeth, tonsils, and internal organs without anesthesia or consent.
Over 300 patients died from these barbaric procedures, yet Cotton was hailed as a pioneer in psychiatric medicine. During the 1950s, Norwich became a testing ground for early psychotropic drugs, with patients used as unwilling test subjects for pharmaceutical companies. Declassified documents reveal that children as young as 8 were subjected to experimental drug cocktails, many of which caused permanent brain damage or death. The hospital's morgue processed over 4,000 bodies during its operational period, with many buried in unmarked graves on the property. Norwich closed in 1996, but urban explorers have documented patient restraints still bolted to floors, medical equipment abandoned in operating theaters, and most disturbing of all, patient artwork covering cell walls, desperate expressions of minds trapped in institutional hell.
Number 1. Poveglia Island, Venice, Italy. On a small island in the Venetian lagoon lies the most haunted place on Earth, where over 160,000 souls met their end in unimaginable agony. For over 400 years, Poveglia Island served as Venice's dumping ground for the diseased, the dying, and the dead. Beginning in 1348, during the Black Death, Venetian authorities forcibly transported plague victims to this isolated 17-acre island, where they were left to die without medical care. Mass graves were dug, bodies were burned in massive pyres, and the ash was mixed with soil, creating a foundation literally built from human remains. In 1922, the island was converted into a psychiatric hospital, where a sadistic doctor conducted gruesome experiments on patients. This unnamed physician performed crude lobotomies using hammers, chisels, and hand drills, believing he could cure mental illness through brain mutilation. Patients reported seeing ghostly figures of plague victims wandering the hospital halls, driving many to suicide by leaping from the hospital's bell tower. The most chilling aspect of Poveglia's history is the soil composition. Over 50% human ash. Agricultural tests reveal that the island's earth contains the cremated remains of over 160,000 people, making it one of the largest human boneyards in history. Fishermen refuse to fish in surrounding waters due to the human bones and skulls that regularly surfaced in their nets. The Italian government has banned public access to Poveglia Island since 1968, though brave urban explorers who've illegally accessed the ruins report overwhelming sensations of dread, disembodied screams, and shadow figures that seem to emerge from the ash-laden soil itself. Today, Poveglia remains abandoned, a testament to humanity's capacity for institutionalized horror, disguised as medical care. These 10 abandoned hospitals represent more than just crumbling buildings. They're monuments to the darkest chapters in medical history, where healing became horror and hope transformed into nightmare. The next time you pass an old hospital, remember that its walls may hold secrets that would make your darkest nightmares seem tame by comparing. Some places are abandoned for good reason, and some doors should never be reopened.